I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Rebecca Johnston, a blockchain and telecom subject matter expert and member of DigitalWorld.Earth, a growing online community focused on decentralized systems and governance implemented through blockchain. Rebecca has over a decade of experience in the telecom and technology sector, along with 5 years of experience in blockchain networks, with past roles at firms including Ventia Australia, the University of Tennessee, and Daly International UK. Becca describes herself as a technologist in critical technology infrastructure, mixed technologies. And along with membership in the Decentralized Governance for Humanity and Technology Council, her experience includes foundations in biotechnology using CRISPR through NSF-funded projects with the Tennessee State University. So Becca, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you with me. Before we get started here, I want to start out the audience with a little bit of background. You and I met a few months ago while you were researching gravitational communications, and I have since learned that you also have an interest in biotech and a passion for decentralized blockchain systems. So I'm wondering, can you start us out with a little bit of background here about what inspired you into all of these bleeding edge areas of science and technology?
Thank you, Tim. It's an honor to be here. And gravitational waves is something that I'm very interested in. And it's probably something that might be its own conversation. And bleeding edge is, yes, definitely the word to use in terms of decentralization and gravitational waves and all these areas. And my interest in these areas, I guess, came through my career that started around 2014 in critical technology infrastructure. When I guess back then, when the world started to connect our networks through fiber optics, copper technologies, wireless technologies, I knew back then that that wasn't going to be the end to where I needed to go in terms of this, getting the world connected. To me, it's like a big giant brain where we've connected the world, and then we connected to all these centralized systems. And after a little while, I knew that there was more problems that we could solve further into the network space. And through my career, I've connected around 2 million premises here in Australia. And so I kind of want to keep my integrity going on through the network, because we connect the networks up into the premise. And for me, I felt like I wanted to do more in terms of how we could better see the network evolve from the premise through the network. So that's where my interest came. And I guess that's why I became an entrepreneur.
Well, there you go. And you know what? I definitely do want to come back and do something with gravitational communications with you in the future. That is on our future list because I love that area and it's something that needs more attention. But today we're focused on decentralization, specifically the Decentralized Governance for Humanity and Technology Council at DigitalWorld.Earth. So what is this project? Who are some of the members of it? And with all of the blockchain technology that's currently out there in the world, what made you choose this project?
Yeah. So when I was searching for solutions for the internet, I guess after a lot of the maintenance was done inside of the networks, I came across blockchain, and then I saw the potentials that blockchain had could do for the network. And some of my friends were just, speaking about blockchain. And then I found the DigitalWorld.Earth, and it was run by some professional entrepreneurs that were just trying to make a difference in the world. And I really enjoyed the values that they had. Also, some of the systems in the web systems that were being built in terms of blocking certain things from the internet that probably shouldn't be there. And I think with how intelligent technology is these days, we should be thinking further into innovations of how to further protect people's mental health in the space of the network. So my values really sat with the people inside of the digital world Earth, and I'm really looking forward to to getting more people on board. I guess if people are interested in this space.
Well, it's an exciting project. And again, thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time. You know, it's a pleasure to interview you on this. So I want to do my standard disclaimer. We're going to be talking about some political process issues today. I am not endorsing any party, government, election process, organization, or product per se. And I just want to put that out there because there is so much politics already out there. I don't want to be a part of that. What I want to do is try and open minds to new ideas about how to do things more efficiently. So in terms of governance, this is a really important concept. The Digital World website proclaims, we believe that the people should have the final say on how their world functions, not an elite few. And as I understand things, you're promoting a democratic model for government and corporate governance that's built on top of blockchain ledgers, right? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. So I see why that question needs to be asked. And in terms of corporate governance, I guess because most of my career has been inside of a lot of bigger organizations. So I've seen the problems inside of these companies. And I myself have tried to solve problems which I just couldn't, it's just hitting a brick wall sometimes. So you have to go out and you have to find other types of solutions. And then, gather the people and then give people a different way to think with new technology. And I think that's the important thing is I think technology is generational and sometimes it's hard to get through to certain generations. So I like to have the idea of transgenerational thinking. And so the digital world Earth is nothing to do with anything corporate. It's completely run by
Okay,
its
good.
individual contributors.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, so the Digital World website bases its principles on the US Constitution, citing checks and balances and the separations of power that we all learned about back in school as an inspiration. It sounds like instead of trying to create a new form of governance, it's actually trying to simply better embody the ideals of the founding fathers through modern technology. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. I think with how much we've connected over the last decade, like the first stages of the internet, it kind of, it was the better stages of the internet where we were just kind of learning exactly like what was going on in the world. And then we found out, like personally from my perspective, we found out that uh it was a little bit crazy. There's a lot of craziness going on in the world. And I think, in terms of what the founding fathers spoke about, maybe we need some founding mothers, you know?
Well, there you go. That's my soundbite right there. Thank you. That's my soundbite. That one goes up online. Um, well, so modern democracy is based on voting, and I think most Americans were a little, perhaps a lot surprised during the last election at how poorly organized our voting system is. So, Becca, I know you're in Australia. I am praying that your system is more organized than ours. Ours, I was shocked would be an understatement. So blockchain is not perfect, but if this was used for voting, presumably you could record every citizen's vote, rapidly conduct accurate recounts if they were necessary, and provide each citizen with a permanent record of the votes that they cast and the candidates that they supported, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be at the top of everyone's to-do list, I think, in governments and organizations. It should be at the top of everyone's to-do list. And I don't know why it's not, because we know that we do have ledgers. We do have ledgers that we can use, but I do think it should be its own ecosystem, and it should be managed by certain people that understand how the confluence of the networks come together. So yeah, absolutely, it should be something, and I would hope that something that evolves over the next couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that some of the recent political pressures and headlines may move that forward. So in the United States, and again, I want to put my disclaimer out there. I am not supporting a party, a candidate, a point of view, any of that stuff. I'm really just talking about the process. And personally, I'm excited about blockchain's ability to transform that process. So in the United States, both major political parties regularly accuse each other of voting the dead, throwing out ballots, manipulating the votes of the elderly and the infirm, convincing ineligible residents to vote without using proper IDs, and a variety of other election crimes. So blockchain would eliminate this cheating and level the playing field, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yes, yes, it definitely would. I mean, like I said, I would hope to see that our governments start adopting this technology in those areas. And it should be a hot topic, it should be a hot topic. But I think there's been a rush to secure other things instead of certain trust and transparency from the people. So I would really like to see that something evolve over the next couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and again, I'm a giant fan of this idea that I mean, voting for me, the example that comes to mind is Gmail, right? And I know it's not apples and oranges, but you have this one web hosted system that can maintain, I mean, thousands of emails for each person. It can do it accurately. And when you log in, your inbox should look the same as it did last time. And yet with voting, we have nothing that's even comparable to that. So, I mean, stuff like Gmail and all of its competitors have been around for decades, right? So I would
Yes.
love to
Yeah.
see something similar for voting, right?
Yes. Yes.
This is who I voted for. This is what when I did it. And, who knows? This is who won the election, maybe some analytics, something like that.
Yeah, it should be on the top of, our government's to-do list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the scope of decentralization is larger than simply voting. I wanted to drill down a little bit on this. And the Digital World website describes centralized government as a weak link in democracy that enables quote unquote private interest groups to easily manipulate people through propaganda. It allows big tech companies to easily censor speech and ideas. It incentivizes class distinctions between the haves and the have nots, and it facilitates the abstraction of currency from value in banks and responsibility from consequences in elected leaders. So, in a lot of ways, centralization has a lot of downsides. It's just something that we've relied on because that's what we've had to use in the past, right?
Yeah, and what we need to understand, I think, too, about the first stages of the internet is when the internet was created, it was based on a type of code that probably at the time, certain generations, they couldn't even understand what code was, or even how to put it together. So it was like we have to have a technological revolution and we have to go ahead with it. And you can't stop technology. It's one of those things that like you got to swim with the river. And what we understand now after learning from, regardless if they were our mistakes or not, like we can innovate on other people's problems, we can create solutions, and it's because of the centralized systems that we can now better understand decentralized technology and build out the world that we shape the world. The people shape the world. We should be able to build it the way that we want our world to be, and I think that's going to be one of the best things about decentralization. So, and what we'll probably see over the next maybe decade is centralization and decentralization coming together beautifully.
Ah, well, and that was something that I saw on the website, and you just touched on that as well, that a lot of decentralized systems can be built on a foundation of centralized systems. And so it's not necessarily one or the other. They can work together in conjunction with each other. And so I think that's very important to point out. It's not simply throwing out the old and bringing in the new. It's a process of carefully integrating them to make sure that it meets everyone's needs in a fair way, right?
Yes, 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 absolutely.
Yeah. Well, in your view, what should be decentralized and what shouldn't? And the reason I ask that is kind of a tail on the
Yeah.
last question there of not everything should be decentralized. All nations have some kind of president or prime minister, for example, to hold a single individual accountable for executive actions. That's one example of centralization that has been there forever. And it even in the case of the United States, right, where the founding fathers were so anti-tyranny, they could have easily gone the other way. They still wanted to have a single executive accountable. So is this an example of one of those cases where decision by consensus simply isn't optimal?
Yeah, I think what we need to understand about decentralization is what is it? Because the blockchain is decentralized, but there are two types. So you can centralize decentralization, which is happening now. So most of the centralized systems where we've got the banks, the larger corporations, they're all decentralizing centralization, which kind of leaves humanity in the lurch because they've decentralized all the centralized systems, and now we need to understand how the individual's data is going to be stored, shared, and transferred. And that's I think the main purpose of this technology is to make sure that our data is not stored with a few large organizations or a few large countries.
Ah, well, do you think I could ask you to elaborate on that last point a little bit? So you've said that like banks and corporations are decentralizing centralized systems. Do you mean that they are storing, like as one example, they're storing customer data, but that data is stored in multiple different places? Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
So I think in terms of that data storage, they're going into a more of like a lower entropy type system. So I mean, our data has always sat on these systems. It's just how do they manage our data properly so it's more secure in the centralized point. But then in terms of tracking our data outside in what we do in our everyday lives, that becomes a different type of conversation. And in terms of I guess, central bank digital currencies. That could be something that comes in the next decade. That's going to be another conversation again, I think, in terms of data and sharing data and using blockchain at the same time. So, yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, and there are so many variations on this also. I was actually when I was writing these questions last night, I was thinking about this decentralized centralization. And I thought, in a strange way, you could almost use the decentralized aspect of it to centralize things. And what I mean by that is if you have customer data on the blockchain, you could issue permissions for different companies to use that, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to store that, right? So you might be able to actually swing things back around the other way as well.
Yeah, that's right. Because we need to look at the blockchain as authentication on the chain. Yeah, that's what we need to look at the blockchain is. But what we do want to make sure that doesn't happen is that the permissions, like if it's permissioned or permissionless, uh, that doesn't kind of run through the networks and people are misled or at least come complacent because I think the education around this technology inside some companies is a little bit uh, on the rough edge.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of rough edges, actually, my next question here was um, public record keeping systems are managed as a mishmash of electronic systems and databases that don't communicate well with each other. And this comes out of my own corporate and government experience working with these systems. You have things at the state, county, and federal level. They store the same information, variations of it. It's not always accurate. They don't always update each other. These systems don't necessarily know that they have the same information, and they're not able to talk to each other to share that information, even though they're all storing different versions sometimes of the same thing. So with blockchain, especially with the DigitalWorld.Earth implementation, right? You could basically store and make these public records accessible universally through a single ledger based on some kind of a permission, right?
Yes. So, how I see this working now inside of our government frameworks is there's one ledger and there's one ledger for education, there's one ledger for banking, and then off those ledgers you can build like forks in the
Mm.
chain, and then from those chains become the permissions and the permissionless. So there is a definitely an art to this to make sure that it's not poorly run. But in terms of identity, I think that's something that we could probably innovate on a little bit more in our public domains.
Yeah. Well, and for the audience, I understand that this technology is already being tested in real estate and county property records and deeds and things along those lines. So, in terms of identification, that's something where, again, it would be able to build off of existing experience as well as building off of these centralized systems, right? So, it wouldn't be rushing in head first. It would be using experience and knowledge that's already out there to hopefully move things forward appropriately.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes, absolutely. It's like a third party ledger, and then you can build off third party ledgers. And if we just need to have a little bit of a different thinking in terms of how we can build out this space.
Well, so Becca, I wanted to ask about the country of Tuvalu, and I hope I have this correctly. You mentioned this to me briefly when we were discussing the interview, and I said, you know what, I got to ask about that. If I understand correctly, your team put Tuvalu on the blockchain in order to help preserve its assets, which are threatened by rising sea levels in the Pacific. Can you tell me a little bit about what this project entails and what does it mean in terms of helping the people of that nation?
Yeah, so Tualavu was an island in the Pacific, and it's a mixed case of shells really, because the island half of the island was actually sinking from fossil fuels, and there was a huge debate that went on, and it went on for a very long time, and nothing got solved. And then eventually they had some storms, and if you do your own research and look at this island, it's got 9 atolls, and it's one of the smallest islands in the Pacific Ocean. And the decision was made from the Minister for Communication on the island. What if our island does go underwater or something happens to our island? What will we do with our island and our people? So the digital world decentralized the entire nation and gave used the blockchain to let every citizen on their island still operate inside of the digital world as a sovereign being and own their identity and still be recognized as a citizen of Tualavu, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
You can
Okay.
still operate. You can still operate in the digital world as a resident and a citizen of that particular island, just in case that island went underwater.
Okay. So they moved the entire thing electronic to be able to preserve the assets and the relationships and the meaning, I guess, that's involved with it, the ownership, all of those things. And then the actual physical island itself is still obviously endangered. Um, Well, so I wanted to see how the Digital World Project could coexist with existing governance in the modern world. Could you foresee this beginning at an international level and eventually trickling down? And when I say that, I was envisioning what some have said the United Nations should have been, right? Which is kind of a meta level above national governments. Do you think that the digital world could be the same thing, like an overlay network perhaps for forms of government?
Yeah, I kind of feel like at this moment it's a grassroots it's like a grassroots led operation where we're just there's a lot of people still trying to figure out what's going on, you know. And what I've seen from the United Nations over the last 3 years, like I probably wouldn't want to meet them in a dark alley because what I've seen is I'm just like, oh my gosh, you know, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna figure it out, you know. I'm gonna figure it out, but it's definitely a grassroots thing. And I would like, you know, it would be good to have more people kind of understand this type of technology. And I think over time it will happen.
Ah, okay. Well, I also wanted to touch on the Clear OS and the Clear server technologies. These are essentially decentralized smartphone technologies. And if I'm guessing correctly, these help keep the electronic gateway to decentralized decision making open to everyone. So, in that way, they would be similar to the reason that Google built the Chrome browser to guarantee access, to guarantee the openness of that gateway to their online systems. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So, big tech and decentralized tech. coming together. Decentralized open source tech is always going to win over big tech. And it's because it's more of an open source model where people can come in and look at the code, and then, say another reputable company can take the code and implement it into their project, which makes our network more immutable and respectable to an individual. And this is, I guess, what we're seeing in terms of how we can better build out the network so it's more sovereign to an individual. And ClearOS, the ClearOS phones, the new technology that we're building, stops that. It's going to be, the digital world is probably going to, if people don't get their act together in terms of data, it's going to be the stop point to where the digital identity belongs to the individual.
Okay. So the technology, again, is really that enabling, and the blockchain is on the phone, right? As well as being on the
Yeah.
servers. Okay.
The blockchain this is a private, like your phone is a private blockchain, and it has got nothing to do with any servers.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think you had some slides that you wanted to show us as well of the
Yes.
technology.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the front end of the decentralized phones, the blockchain phones. So basically, what this is if you've ever had a, say, like a crypto wallet, and you've got like the encryption code where you get the 12 words, when you get your phone, you have your own encryption codes. So you get your own encryption keys and your private blockchain, and it ties in to the back end storage. So you'll see here there's uh, separate devices here, which are private storage devices, and these are this is connected to your biometrics, and this is private storage. So if you think of like what we had probably the last decade, we had a Surrey or a Google Home, which was connected to a centralized system. This is going to be private storage to your private data. So this is how we're changing the back end of the phones.
Wonderful. Well, Rebecca, let me thank you so much for your time today. It has been a true pleasure having you with me. And again, we will come back and we will do gravitational communications in the future. For me, the takeaway today has been that modern technology may be able to empower us to more fully realize the principles of modern democracy. And so let me close by asking, where do you see this going? Where do you see DigitalWorld.Earth going in the future?
Yeah, the DigitalWorld.Earth, we're going to be around for a while, I do believe. And I hope that, more people will understand this type of technology over time and see how it can further empower them, because our technology should be here to empower us. I think that it's going to be an exciting space to work in. And also, October, November, we've got some new devices, some new phones that have been going to be released, new and improved from the first lot that we had. It's only going to get better from here, I'm sure. And I would love to, see more people perhaps coming together and co-creating. I think we should start using our technology for something good for the world.
Wonderful. Becca, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.